Welcome, team. Another week of Rural Sales Show here, and I have a very special guest by the name of David Priemer. And David is in Ontario, Canada. He wrote a brilliant book that you will need to go and buy called Sell the Way You Buy. So why don't you tell us who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
For sure. Well, the funny thing about sales, which is, the folks that are hopefully listening to this, is that no one gets into this on purpose. I don't know what it's like where you are, but we don't offer a lot of training programs in school around sales, and no one visits their guidance counselor and the guidance, what you should do when you grow up. No one ever says that about sales. And so I was no different than probably everyone else. I got into sales by accident at the turn of the dot-com boom. And I was a research scientist before I got into sales. So I was, and not even a psychology-based research. I was like science and engineering. I was doing graduate work in chemical engineering, building computer models. Ended up getting into sales at the turn of the dot-com boom by accident, and ended up joining this little startup. There was 20 of us at the time, and ended up falling in love with sales because all of like the nuance, the sales was so amazing, so many variables and so much complexity that for me as an engineering mind, I love just kind of picking it apart. And we ended up growing this company from 20 people to 700 people and $100 million business over the course of several years. We got acquired, and it was an amazing journey. And again, fell in love with sales. So over the course of the next 20 years, I ended up spending my time across 4 high growth tech companies. They all ended up being acquired, and one which I helped start in 2008 was acquired by Salesforce. A lot of people have heard of Salesforce, big tech company. Came over with the ship, spent 5 awesome years there, seeing how the sales machines were built kind of operationally and culturally at scale, and really loved it. Ended up running small business sales for the Eastern US for Salesforce as a Canadian. But through all this time, you asked me, so, why do you do what you do? I realized that I love to buy things, but I also hate talking to salespeople. And I found that, hate's a strong word, but I found that a lot of the tactics that my teams would use to connect with customers and outreach and all that kind of stuff were just never things that would work on me if I found myself on the buying side. And so to solve this problem, I went back to my entrepreneurial and research scientist roots and say, okay, let me just pick out the trends and patterns here. Like, how do people actually buy? What are the pathways and mechanisms by which people make purchasing decisions? And is there a systematic way that we can, in a very human, high conviction fashion, authentic, activate some of these channels to be more successful at selling? And that's why I do what I do. I love sales, but I again hate the fact that when you tell someone you're in sales, you're not the most popular bloke at the party, right? So how can we rehabilitate in a way this amazing profession that has given so much to so many, which is actually the number one, if you look at the stats in America, it's the number one profession that exists. Like, the most people in America are in sales in some form or another. And so how can we help people do this in a high conviction, high authenticity way, given that we don't teach people in school to do this? So that's a little bit about me and why I do what I do.
Yeah, you're being super modest already. Let's get into the cerebral stuff. So you call yourself a sales scientist, and you have this wonderful business called cerebral selling, I should say. I think reading your beautiful book, and you got this endorsed by Dan Pink, who's a bit of a hero of mine. How the hell did you get that? How did you get Dan Pink's endorsement on your book? Let me know how you do it.
Well, so it's funny. I guess it's in a way, it's a lesson in selling. But Dan Pink, when he wrote the book Drive, he came on. This was even before podcasts. We used to do webinars back. This is like in the late, this is like 2009, 2010 at my company. We used to do webinars. And so he was publishing Drive at the time. And so we asked him to come on, the show. I didn't have any personal relationship with him.
Such a good book.
Great book. And then, what happened was, when I was publishing my book, I was a big fan of To Sell is Human, which is like,
another great book.
Another great book. And so as I was thinking, okay, like, who would I love to have endorse the book? Dan Pink. So I reached out to Dan on his site. I said, Dan, this was 10 years later, after the first, I'm like, you may not remember, you wrote Drive, you came on our show. And I said, there's no one I can think of better. And I actually I didn't have his email address, so I just had to go on his website and, you know, fill out the contact me form. And he got back to me. You know, that was the first thing. And like, apparently it goes to him and he responded to me and he's like, yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy
Oh,
to
so he
help.
got back to you quickly? It didn't
Yeah,
hit his
he got
spam
back
or
to me.
anything?
Got back to me quickly. And no, he was great. And it was a real pleasure just to have his, you know, voice, because, and you know what, part of it is when you reach out to someone, you say, like, I'm already talking about you in my book. I'm a big fan. I talk about you. So, yeah, he was great. So it's interesting, not to unnecessarily get too quickly into a sales lesson here, but one of the things that I talk about in my negotiation, which is ironic because in Sell the Way You Buy, the book was already too big, didn't have time to get into negotiation. There's a concept that I talk about, which is from a lady by the name of Vanessa Bond. She's a professor at Cornell University. She wrote a book, and she wrote a Harvard Business Review article, and it was called something like, You're Already More Persuasive Than You Think. And then she wrote a book by, I think, the same name. And in it, she describes some of her research where she basically says, you know, people psych themselves out all the time from taking a risk or making a decision or reaching out to Dan Pink and asking to endorse their book. So she did this little experiment where, let's say she's, okay, you know, St. John, you and I are standing on a street corner in New York City, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop people and random strangers and ask them if we can use their phone to make a phone call. And then I ask you, how many people do you think it's going to take before we find someone who says yes, right? And then we do the experiment and we see how many people it actually took. And so they do this experiment across a number of, you know, different types of things. And they found that the amount of people that you think it's going to take to find to get compliance to your request is a lot higher than what it actually took. And so this idea, the thesis is you're already more persuasive than you think. So some people might say, well, I can't get Dan Pink. Oh my gosh, like, why would he want to endorse my book? But you just ask. And we
a bit like I asked you, David. Just like I asked you, I just pestered you on LinkedIn. Said, hey, David, I've been just listening to Andy Paul's Win Rate podcast, and you were brilliant, and I've read your book. Will you come on my tiny little show? And you said, yeah. And I was absolutely, I'm a big fan of Don't Ask, Don't Get, but I also think it's the way in which you ask.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought when you said we were going to be on a sidewalk in, you know, Upper Manhattan or wherever, and we weren't going to be asking people to use their phones, but like to look up into the sky and see how many people start looking in the sky. But you know the social experiment of conformity. But anyway,
yes.
we will not go down a rabbit hole on that. So well done, well done on getting Dan's recommendation. Well done on what is a brilliant book. Now, unpack for us your philosophy of selling, and I'm using the sales word with inverted commas as I talk to you with little rabbit ears. Because we have to tread very carefully there, because we both know that not only there are accidental default salespeople, but most of them don't know how to sell because they don't know how they're being received and perceived by the buyer's brain. So can you unpack that as the expert here? What's going on there when we're not tuned in to our buyer and you know, Dan Pink talks about attunement, but from your point of view, what you sell and what you teach and what you train, what's going on there when someone's not tuned into me and is selling to me and serving their needs, not mine? What's happening in the brain, the buyer's brain?
Well, you know, the brain operates on these very subconscious levels of, like, you know, do I trust this person? Do I even understand what they're saying? If they're pitching to me, like, it's like when you see a movie that's not good and you don't know why, because it's got a star-studded cast, great celebrities, and you're like, I'm just not gelling with this movie. It's your brain telling you that they're not telling the narrative in a way that is computing, that's making sense for you. Like, you don't believe it. And so your brain is always on the lookout for these kind of trends and patterns. And so when and by the way, one of the challenges with how we sell today is that because there's no school, because there's no, you know, it's not like being a doctor where there's a right way to take someone's appendix out. It's not like a free-for-all. In sales, we can do whatever we want. And so what happens is bad behaviors end up getting passed down from sensei to, you know, to student over the course of time. Meanwhile, the world of buying has changed so much. You know, forget in the, you know, if I were to say the last 20 years, that's ridiculous. Like in the last year, in the last 2 years, so much has changed. So we can't keep going out and using these tactics that are based in nothingness and just history when the way people buy and the way people think about their purchasing decisions have changed. And also in a way where like the buyer's tolerance for bad sales behavior is much less than it was before, because now they can get access to all the information about your product online before they even speak to you. So you actually have to add a ton of value over what someone could just do in an automated sense. So the world has changed a lot. And so you ask like, well, what happens in the mind of the buyer? First of all, there's this question of like, is this person being authentic? Do I, believe what they're telling me? Does this product even make sense? Does it trigger my emotional need? And this is where I talk a lot about in the book. Like, people buy feelings 100% of the time. And it's not like a conjecture. Like, we know this from science, So how does the emotional center of the brain get activated based on the interaction I'm having with the seller? And when I say emotion, it can be in a variety of ways. It could be something that I get excited about because, I say, hey, look, people love to buy things. They hate talking to salespeople. And already, boom, like you're hooked listening to what I have to say because I just whipped out this polarizing statement and you've now either agreed or disagreed whether or not you're on my side. When, for example, we ask someone what their budget is, like this is a standard sales thing. We're talking to a customer, like, oh, you're looking to buy A, B, and C. Like, what's your budget? Yeah. Like, think about it. I say to people, and it's funny because we train salespeople. We say, okay, great. When you go into the conversation with the customer, you got to find out the budget and the need and the timing and like who's going to sign this thing. The bant. And that's not bad. That's the what. The real question as it relates to modern selling is the how. How are you going to extract that information? So when I ask someone what their budget is, like when you go into a car dealership, the salesperson's like, what's your budget for cars? Like, what do you start thinking about?
Well, I start thinking that they're about to put their hand in my pocket and try and take as much money from it.
Yeah, because okay, if I say a number, maybe I should lowball because I don't want to anchor them too high, and then they're going to try to, then they're going to try to upsell me, and they ask, well, what kind of car do you drive today? And if I say something fancy, they're going to be like, oh, cha-ching. So we're always suspicious about the motives of the other person for asking us questions. And so it's not just about like, what do we want to know and how we describe the value of our solutions, but how we I call this the science of self-disclosure. Like, how do we get people to open up to us about their real problems, right? And their needs. And part of this is conscious. So yes, let's say, for example, I've, my tractor just broke down and now I'm talking to you and you want to sell me a new piece of machinery. If I tell you my tractor just broke down, then all of a sudden you're licking your chops saying, all right, I'm going to sell this guy something.
I've got dollar signs in my eyes. Yeah,
that's right. It's like in the tech world, if I sell like IT security software and you just told me you had a data breach, then I'm like, oh, now it's like you just had a fire and now you need a fire extinguisher. So I'm always concerned as a buyer what I've let the other person, and as the seller, you're always trying to figure out, how do I get this person to tell me their deepest, darkest secrets and problems in a way, because, you want to sell them something, but also because you want to know if this is something that they're going to buy. Is this something I can help you with? And so part of the trick to being good at sales is to understand the pathways and mechanisms by which people are making these purchasing decisions and how they think about the questions you ask them. So that's why I say, like, it's very easy to read down on a checklist of things I need to ask the customer, but that's not enough anymore to be good at sales.
No. And I think, listeners, this is gold, because this is why I've been looking forward to having David on and very excited about talking to him. Is he said it's not the what, it's the how. And I love this concept of the science of self-disclosure. And you said, look, like buyers meet salespeople because they've got that pattern recognition machine, because our brains are energy efficient and very lazy. And they're like, you're a salesperson. They don't even feel suspicious. They don't feel safe. And when the buyer doesn't feel safe, they're not going to be vulnerable. And they're not going to self-disclose in the way that you said. And you said, like, sell me something. We're going to sell them something. I don't think we're going to sell them something. Forgive me to hear this, might be me being terribly brave, but I don't necessarily think we're trying to sell them something. We're trying to make sure that they make the best, most informed and accurate decision for them. Like, we're helping them buy. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's interesting. because I ask that question to people, and I ask that in the book, and I say, okay, let's say I looked at 100 of your customers, and I looked at the sales cycle you ran with them. And at the end of that sales cycle, 3 things can happen. They buy from you, they buy from someone else, or they do nothing. Like, those are the only 3 ways that a sales cycle ends.
100%.
And I ask the question, I say, like, when that person ended up in one of those 3 buckets, if you were an independent observer, you don't care about the customer, you don't care about you, you're not trying to sell them anything, what percentage of the time would you say that that customer made the best decision for them, objectively best? Thinking about it, here's like a tangible kind of personal example. If I asked you to write down, if you're listening to this, I asked you to write down everything that you ate for lunch in the last month. Okay, you write down every meal that you had for lunch. And then I said, I'm going to take that list and I'm going to give it to your doctor. And I'm going to ask your doctor, what percentage of the time did this person eat the best thing, objectively speaking, for them for lunch? Portion size, food groups, nutrition. What percentage of the time would you say that you ate the best thing for you, objectively speaking?
Question for me?
Yeah.
I would say probably not a lot or not enough. And is the intent of your question there around our reluctance to self-disclose?
No. So the point of that question is, and 100%, the answer for most people is not most of the time.
Yes, correct.
It's also the same, it's, in fact, the same kind of answer is when a customer buys your product or service, what percentage of the time would you say they made the best decision for them? If you're searching your heart of hearts, because I asked this to thousands of people, the answer is not most of the time, even when they bought your product or service. And so that's not an indictment of you. It doesn't mean you have a bad product or service, or it doesn't mean you're fantastic at sales.
Yeah.
It just means that people don't make the best decisions for them. This is not an objective exercise.
Now I'm with you, David. Now I'm with you because often we're selling to farmers, as we are, and the people listening here in the listenership. And those farmers, or whatever potential buyer in front of you, aren't necessarily making the best decision for themselves. They decide to halve their fertilizer bill so their pastures won't grow, so their cattle won't put on weight. They decide to defer this, cut this, choose a cheaper option. I mean, there's the bias of the seller who are commercially invested because I want you to buy my stuff. But the reality is, I feel buyers feel most safe when they know that I'm genuinely, authentically helping you make the best decision in your best interest rather than mine. And that's what I call non-assumptive selling.
Mm-hmm. And I might choose to work with you because I feel like you have my best interest in mind, even if your product isn't objectively as good as someone else's product.
Absolutely.
Because what am I buying? And we've all had this situation where we walked out of a retail store or a showroom because the salesperson was being a jerk, They were not knowledgeable, whatever, for the same product. I walked out of a car dealership and went to another car dealership to buy the same car.
Same
car.
Sure.
Yeah.
Same story.
Just because I didn't like the salesperson.
No, I hated them.
But on the flip side, I might choose to work with a salesperson I really like, even though their product may not be the best on the market, just because what I'm buying is the experience of working with that individual.
You mean you're buying the person?
I'm buying the person. Yeah. And look, the product still has to be good, right? I'm not saying the product is crap, but the idea is that I'm buying you as much as I'm buying the feeling 100%. And enjoyment.
100%. And that's, listeners, the feeling here, in the limbic brain, once they got out the amygdala of, I feel safe with David. He sees me. He understands me. He's asking good questions. They're not the intent of his questions because my antennae is up because I've been burnt and bruised by so many people before. There's a genuine, authentic curiosity. There's a sincerity of his intent to serve by the type of the questions you're asking. Because when you ask the question, what's your budget? That's a self-serving question. It's not a question about you. It's a question that serves me. Or, what's your biggest pain point? Or what keeps you up at night, David? Or how do I win your business back? Like, they're all desperate and needy and rather yucky. And unfortunately, yes, there are some sensei's that still teach that to their students.
I hate the what keeps you. That's the worst. The what keeps you up at night. I also do believe that if you're going to be in sales, you need to add value above and beyond your product. You know, it's like if you want to go buy a TV and you go into the store and you ask the sales, tell me about this TV versus that TV, and all they're doing is they're reading the little cards, you know, below the.
You just
Like,
buy
I'm not an
online.
idiot. I could have done that. You
I
know
could just do that
what I
online.
want you to. Yeah, I could do it online. Like I want you to tell me the things that I can't find out on my own.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that in order to add value as a seller, you need to be in that mind. You need to be adding value beyond the product and service, right? Like
Yeah.
sharing industry insights and bringing problems as well. When you think about it, and I'm a big fan of this, like as a seller, you sell your product or service all the time to everyone. If you're selling, let's say, a piece of, you know, farm machinery, I sell these all the time. The person buying that piece of farm machinery doesn't buy this thing very often, right?
So true.
And so they don't know what the latest technologies are or like why I should consider A versus B. I'm used to the 25-year-old piece of machinery that I already have, you know. So as a seller, we need to be able to help our customers by not only being knowledgeable about the products or services, but all of the discussion and thought that goes around it. And if I can do that, that just as much as anything is the thing that our customers are buying. Like when you, it's funny to give like a tangible example from my world and your world. So I sell, let's say I sell sales training. So why would someone hire me? They would hire me because you'd think that I'm going to impart some knowledge to their sales team, and their sales team is going to go out and execute better, and there's going to be a lift in some conversion rate metric in their sales funnel, and the company's going to make more money, and hopefully more money than they paid me to impart those tactics. Why would someone hire me if it wasn't for that? But then, during the pandemic, we stopped investing in training. People didn't come into the office anymore. And so some companies said, you know what, shoot, we should do sales training. Yeah, for the conversion rate lift. But also, we haven't done anything nice for our team members lately. They're all working remote. They're not sharing best practices like they used to. I like this idea of bringing David in because it ticks a bunch of boxes of like a nice thing that we're doing for our team members. It brings them together, gets them sharing stuff. And yeah, it doesn't mean that the conversion rate uplift doesn't happen, but there are multiple reasons why people are buying things, right? Maybe, for example, I'm running my agricultural operation, and the cost of something has just skyrocketed. And if I don't find a solution that helps me save money on whatever it is, feed or machinery or whatever, then I'm not going to have a farm anymore.
Yeah.
And so now the salesperson is not only increasing the efficiency of my operation, they're a lifeline to save my whole business, my whole livelihood. And that's a very different feeling. And that exists in every sale. There's like the personal sale, the strategic sale. And so what's really important as a seller is for you to be dialed in to the emotional motivators for why people are choosing your product or service. And it could be because of the product or service itself. It could be the experience that you bring and the experience they have with you. And even simple things like giving them the ability to say no. If they think that they're going to be hurting our feelings by saying no, then they're more likely to lie. Not lie, but lie. Okay, lie. And be disingenuous and string us along. When as a seller, if you're going to lose, I kind of want to lose fast. I don't want to lose slow. So by giving customers permission to tell us no, that's another thing that helps with the experience, right? So on all these things are feelings and emotional base that transcend the product or service that we sell.
100%.
That's why it doesn't matter who you are.
100%. And I think when I train my rural sales teams, I say to them, when you meet farmers, they're the most emotional customer you can meet. Because when you talk about their livestock and their livelihood and their farm and their homestead and their land and what it means to them, and it's been in 5-6 generations, and they are absolutely paranoid about losing the farm for the first time in the family, there's a lot at stake. So we all think of ranchers or farmers as big, stoic men and women who, cross their arms and don't say much and don't waste word, and sort of John Dutton types who just sort of, growl and don't say much. There's a lot of emotion just under the surface there. And so I think what David's saying here is like, you have to be emotionally tuned or dialed in. And then I would challenge, and then I'm really interested in what David has to say is, but the first person you need to be truly dialed into is yourself in order to be able to be dialed into others.
Yeah, I mean, dial into yourself. There's a few elements. Number one is, how your words make people feel. So when you ask them, what's your budget? What's the timing? How does that make people feel? The other piece, which goes along with the how, not just the what, are things like conviction, authenticity. I often ask people, I say, like, can you tell that I love what I do? I love what I do. And I say, can you tell? And they're like, oh yeah, I can tell. And I say, I'm not fishing for compliments, but how can you tell? They're like, oh, well, you're very enthusiastic and you don't stumble and you're very clear on what you have to say. Look, I'm glad you're feeling that from me. I love what I do. I'm grateful that I get to do what I do. Let me ask you a question. When you're selling the thing that you're selling, do you think I can tell whether or not you believe in what you're selling and what you're doing? And it doesn't matter what the words are. It's the feeling that gets imparted. In fact, I talk about this in the book, but I ended up writing an article in Harvard Business Review in 2019, which I talk about this concept that I noticed when I was at Salesforce, which is I used to run small business sales. So I had a lot of young salespeople. And these young salespeople, we would tell them to call high. Go call VPs of sales and marketing, grown-ups whose job you've never done. And, manifest confidence and conviction, right?
By standing up when you're on the phone.
I've seen that as well, a lot of, but so think about it, if you're out there and I'm curious to, St. John, to hear like what you say, but, if I'm one of your listeners and I'm selling a product or service, have I ever been a customer of that product or service? Like if I'm selling farm machinery, have I ever been a farmer and used that machinery before? Because if so, then great. I should be able to manifest confidence and conviction, right? Is that the case? Most of the folks that are listening.
Most of them are farming related or farming. The best ones have the insider command, conviction, confidence that you talk about because they've actually lived there and been on the farm and used the machines and they know their lives. They see them and they know that, and the buyer knows that they've been seen.
That's really important because I'm less likely to buy something from someone who doesn't really understand the journey I've been on.
Correct.
But even still, as a seller, if I'm unable to manifest the confidence and conviction in my narrative, people can tell. And that's what I found with these young sales reps where they had tons of activity, no shortage of calls and emails and things they were doing, but then no pipeline. And so when I would listen sometimes to their conversations, they would record them with customers. I would listen. I would say, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like you're bothering this. You know what it sounds like? It sounds like one of my kids when they're about to hit me up for something they think I'm going to say no to. That's what it sounds like. Yeah. You ever have like a kid, they're like, Dad.
I've got 3 of them. I know all about that. Hey, Dad.
Yeah. You can tell just by the way I have 3 too. Yeah. Just by the way they say like, hey, Dad. And like when they say Dad, you're like, the answer is no, whatever it is. You're immediately defensive. Because of the way you're asking me.
Yes.
Right? But if you approached it with more confidence and conviction, different story. The problem is that sometimes it's hard for us to manifest confidence and conviction when what we're given is like a feature sheet from the product. The marketing team, God bless him, gives us content.
God bless those marketing teams.
Like a lot of the things that we get sometimes from marketing include words that human beings don't say to each other. It's all like marketing speak. It doesn't come off as authentic. And so if that's all I have,
we're big on collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, well, exactly. The marketing speak. Exactly. Because it's not human speak.
Yes. Correct. And it's okay for something to be on your website that you don't say to human beings, but human beings can tell when what you're saying is not something that another person would say to someone, so you have to sound human. And that's actually the best way. One of the challenges is that when we put words in people's minds and mouths that make them sound like robots, they don't articulate them with the humanity
they don't own
that they
them.
need.
they don't own them because they're not actually part of them. So they reject them, even if it's subconscious. And then that vibe, that spidey sense of your body doesn't feel it. It's interesting because when you and I are training people, the criticism I have sometimes is, I've learned the lines that St. John taught me, or the verbiage. And I said, you realize that when I say different words, they go to different parts of the brain. And when they work that out, they're like, oh, so if I said considered, diligent, prudent, responsible, I'm assuming they're going to go to your thinking brain, not to your amygdala. If I say risk, threat, fire, loss, I think that's going to go to a different part of the brain. Am I getting that right? Am I getting that wrong, David?
I'm not sure if different words go to different parts of the brain. I feel like it's just the and maybe they do. That's not I didn't get down to that
I need
level.
an MRI scanner, and we need to put them hats on and start yelling words at each other.
Well, they do, when they do research into how people's different parts of the brain light up under different circumstances, it's usually, from the research that I've seen, it's usually like circumstantial. So, for example, if I ask you a question, so I talk about this in the book, there's certain questions we do discovery that people like to answer. And those are questions where we ask them their opinions on things. I say, like, St. John, why do you think so many sellers struggle with this? There's no right answer. It's whatever you think. And people love sharing their opinions. But if I asked you a fact-based question, like how long has this been going on for? That's not as interesting for your brain. And we know this because we put people through MRI machines when we ask them these questions. And we know, there's different parts of the brain that lights up. Even from a leadership perspective, when we ask people, hey, St. John, I want you to think about a leader who, you didn't particularly care for. We can see like the parts of the brain associated with, fear and avoidance start to light up. So, I'm not sure if they're specific words. It's just more the feelings that the actions emote.
Yeah, love it. Absolutely love it. My next question, David, is when you train folk, and you're obviously very, very good at what you do, high-tech software companies, you've got amazing pedigree from your Salesforce days, best-selling books, Harvard Business Reviews, all the rest of it. When you deal with a company, do you ever hear the words, but we're different?
From time to time, I do.
Yeah, and my friend, what is your response?
Well, as we were kind of talking about, there are no differences. Humans.
Hooray! Hallelujah! Can we just say that again for the listeners on the record? No, but we're different from the other guys. The thing you have to understand with us, David, is our team and our product and our company is different.
Yeah,
and
you're not. Everyone thinks that they're like this unique snowflake, but you're not. You have the same problems as everyone else. Right. They might manifest a little differently, but at the end of the day, Simon Sinek, who I'm also a big fan of, he talks about like 100% of buyers are humans, right? And 100% until future notice of sellers are humans. And so I actually find that with all the, and here's the proof, like with all the technology we have, sales technologies, AI, all these kinds of things, like when you look at the data, it actually takes twice as long and twice as much effort to connect with a customer today as it did, 10 years ago. And so with all this technology, it's not easier, right? It's harder. And at the end of the day, selling is still an act, unless you're buying something online, that takes place between two human beings, regardless of what you sell. So, and the same principles we talked about earlier, to how people buy feelings, not products. We don't always make the best decisions for us. We all exist as sellers in some kind of sea of sameness. Think about okay, great. So I have a great pedigree. I have a book. I train people. I do keynote speeches. You know how many people do that? Millions of people do that. So as much as I think I'm unique and differentiated, I'm not. I live in a sea of sameness just like everyone else, where I have to kind of stand out. So the problems that we all have are 100% consistent. And like I said, I work with tech companies. I work with dog food companies. I work with courier companies. Everyone has the same challenges. I
love it. I hope everyone's listening to that. Because the funny thing is, what you've said there, and I'm so glad you validated, because it was going to be really embarrassing and awkward for me if you didn't. But that's okay, because my fragile ego couldn't take that, David. But everyone says they're different, and we've agreed that they're not. Because the thing is, as Simon Sinek says, as you say, as Dan Pink says, one thing stays the same and constant is that it's humans. And the thing is, human psychology has not changed.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it? I think psychology, when you really boil it down to its basics, it's just curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when people are curious, I think it's a superpower because it opens more doors than criticism. So curiosity opens doors, criticism closes them. So when I'm curious as a seller, that curiosity, as long as it's the right intent, and I'm curious about how I can help you or not, and qualify that quickly, then again, I think my buyer's going to feel safe. But the psychology space, I think, like my mic drop, and that might sound very boastful and a bit of a flex there. I had an epiphany over the weekend. I've told no one about this, David. This is a world first for David and St. John. And I haven't, this isn't me jacking it up or pretending to be cute. So I was reading and reflecting, as I do, read lots of books, like the beautiful books you read and write, and Dan Pink and Zig Ziglar and all the guys, all the classics, all the new. And I said, there's this thing called there's 3 circles in the classic Venn diagram. And the first circle is the product. And the second circle is the prospect. And then the third circle is the person that's selling. Where does most training point to? Which circle?
The product.
The product. So you and I turn up and they say, hey, David, can you come do a happy clappy for half an hour and change our complete sales trajectory? And you and I are clever enough to say, no, can't do that. That won't work. Because I look at the planning conference agenda and it's a day and a half of product, feature, creature, selling. And then marketing get 2 hours because they need a lot of time, right? Peace to the market. We do love marketing. So it goes on the product. And then if you're really lucky, you get someone clever like David that comes and trains you about the prospect. But if you're even luckier, and I think this is where the neglect, David, is not here in the industry, is learning about you as a person. Because in our world, and unless you're selling and buying remotely and online, I'm buying into you before anyone else, before anything else, any product, any service, any brand, any company. And that's why I think, Andy Paul is doing a great service to everyone around the humanness of selling, and why I put him onto the Jeff Colvin book, why humans are underrated, and in AI and automation and everything else. But what would you say around the sort of human centricity, if there's such a word, or the feeling frequency? I just made that up. Humans being really, really tuned into themselves so then they can be tuned into their buyer and then help their buyer make, hopefully, a good decision.
I mean, I like what you said all the way back to curiosity. I think one of the challenges that a lot of sellers have is this concept of confirmation bias, where we think, oh yeah, everyone's going to want what I have because what I have is great and I'm great.
My self-esteem is attached to the thing I sell, my sense of self-worth. This is why the machinery guys, if you took the product away from them, there's nothing left.
Right. I mean,
generalization.
The problem in sales in general is that because we're so metrics driven, we either won or we lost. We got the sale, we didn't get it. We got the commission, we didn't get it. This is now we're getting all kind of existential, but it's tough to not let our egos get tied up in the dashboard.
Very much so.
And so part of what you can do to put yourself in that right mindset. And by the way, I've done podcasts with other folks, where we talk about this concept of, for example, negotiation. If I'm trying to negotiate with someone and I really, really, really want the sale, there's a former, I have this on my website, a former procurement specialist who now teaches negotiation, and he called that commission breath. He's like, I can always tell when someone really, really, really wants the sale.
We have it with livestock agents or real estate agents. We smell the commission breath a mile away, mile away.
And it's very off-putting as a buyer. And you kind of wonder, to your question, do they know that they're putting this vibe out? Are they in tune enough with their emotional state?
They're too consumed with serving their own needs because their survival and status and significance depends on it.
100%. So what you have to do in order to be successful is almost like disassociate yourself from the outcome. It's to say, look, whether you buy something or not, my value as a person is not tied up, in this, and also approaching it from the standpoint of maybe my solution isn't for you. If I start from that perspective, now I look for confirmatory evidence that it is. I'm starting from a position of not, then I'm not going to be disappointed. And then also you'll, as the buyer, feel that there's much less pressure on you to buy something because I'm not being a jerk and saying, I don't care, I don't care if you buy anything from me, but you won't feel that same pressure. If I make it okay for you to say no, and I talk about this in Sell the Way You Buy, the science, the data is on your side. The social experiments show that when I make it okay for someone to say no, they're more likely to say yes, or at least give me the right answer, or at least give me like the truthful answer. Like if we went out on a date and, I tried to call you and you ghosted me, or I said, hey, do you want to go out next Saturday night? You might
mean
give
like
me
the way I was doing it on LinkedIn, trying to get
exactly
you on
the way you were relentlessly pursuing. No, but I may not, like, let's say you were trying to come after me and I'm like, oh, he seems like a nice guy. I don't want to hurt his feelings by saying no. So then I just ghost you and I just don't respond. But if you said, hey, David, I know you're a busy guy. I would love to have you on the show. But if the answer is no and you're too busy, that's okay too. Right? Like at least you would get a response out of me because now you've made it okay.
I think you just surely just read that from the LinkedIn message box. Really, you must have.
No,
I agree. What I love, I knew we were going to have a great conversation, is the disassociative or the detachment discipline you need to have. So often I train my guys as saying, look, hey, David, what I do, I don't even know it's going to work for you and your farm. So why don't we ask a couple of questions and I can qualify if what we do might be of help. And if it's not, we can move on. And if it does, then we can work out if it makes sense to continue to have a conversation. How does that sound?
Yeah, look, that's classic, kind of upfront contract. I'm making it okay for you to say no. I'm teasing some value. And I think this is the important thing. Before we give people the opportunity to say no, we have to tease some value. So for example, if I cold called you and I said, oh, hey, St. John, it's David calling from Cerebral Selling. Do you have a second to chat? And if the answer is no, that's okay too. You would take that out every time. Like, why would I want to talk to you? Like, I don't know why. But if you said, hey, look, we work with some of the best, farmers, in your region. We've helped them do A, B, and C. I don't know if I can help you yet. But if you're up for a chat, I'd be happy to explore. And if the answer is no, that's okay too. It's now I've teased the promised land. And now you might be more inclined to take that call with me.
I love that. That's just gold. If anyone writes that down, and say it again, David, I don't know if, say that again.
No, so the part about like the highlighting value, the upfront piece, hey, look, I've been working with lots of, folks in your space, in your region. I might even highlight some of the challenge. Like, so for example, in my space, I might say, hey, look, I've been working with lots of sellers lately who are really struggling because the market has changed. They're realizing that being successful isn't about what they need to execute. It's about the how. It's about the conviction, the humanity. Because a lot of the tactics that used to work don't work anymore. Now, look, St. John, can I help you? I'm not sure yet. We have to have this conversation. If I can, great,
I don't know
but
if you're
not,
up for it. I don't know if you're up for it. And it's lovely. What I like about how you frame that is you have remained safe, non-assumptive, tease them some value because, hey, look, we've been getting some really good results with X, Y, and Z, and they've been enjoying this. And obviously things have been changing and things have been challenging. But I don't even know if you're up for that discussion. And I love what you've done there.
Yeah, yet. But I'm teasing value. And I'm saying like, hey, look, next step would be have a chat. And if, even after the chat, if the answer is no, it doesn't make sense, that's okay too. In fact, I actually go one step further because of the nature of what I do. And maybe the folks that are listening could do something similar. Like I have lots of stuff for free. Like if you don't want to hire me, you could buy my book. The book is not an expensive investment. I also have tons of online stuff for free. And regardless of how this turns out, I'm happy to furnish you with helpful stuff. So it'll be valuable for you either way.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the sincerity of that. And I love, I haven't coined it, but for some reason I picked up on it, is my philosophy is very much you serve before you sell. You serve before you sell. And I also make sure that when we're, I often think like, there's almost a title of the book in me, although I'm sure it's done because most of my thoughts aren't original. They're always synthesized, is the problem with sales is selling. The more we try to sell, the less we will sell. you know, and I say it provocatively to get some attention, but it's like David wasn't selling there. He's trying to understand. He's got some results. He's got a track record. And then he's trying to work out, well, you know, I'm not sure if there's something that might work for you or not, but the best thing to do is just have a chat with it. And if we decide that it makes sense, we can carry on the conversation. If not, we're free to go.
Mm-hmm.
And see the humaneness of that, David. That's what I love about it. It's very, very soft and it's very human. And yet we make sales so complicated.
Yeah, 100%. It's, you know, and that's kind of injecting the humanity back into the selling is ironically something we have to teach because we've learned how to do selling in such a, you know,
inhuman,
like a unidirectional fashion over the years, because maybe that used to work, you know, years ago.
It's like an inhumane robotic way, you know, where we're just seeing someone with a dollar above their head rather than another human being. David, I'm going to let you go. I've just got a couple of questions before I go. Is if you had one piece of advice for a salesperson that's listening to this, you know the sector that we serve. If you only could give them one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be and why?
Well, you know, for this, I always come back to like the sell the way you buy, you know, which is kind of the mantra that I've been saying for years, which is why I called the book that. But it's just be really curious about what it's like to be in your customer's shoes and sell like that. You know, be curious about how they make their purchasing decisions, not how they tell you they make the purchasing, but how they actually, from a human decision-making standpoint, how they do it, the experience they have working with you. Look at it from their perspective, and you'll just be a better seller. That's it.
Very good. Very good. Hey, David, really appreciated the show. The last thing is you have a new project coming up, don't you, that you mentioned?
I do, yeah. I've written another, but it's funny to think like Sell the Way You Buy, you know, it came out, it's almost 4 years ago now. And gratefully, people continue to discover the book, and it, you know, continues to sell. It's been published in 6 or 7 languages now around the world, so I'm really grateful. But I have a new book coming out. It's all about the underserviced and special people in the sales leadership seats, because sales leadership, in many ways, compared to sales, is even worse. Like there's very little training for sales leaders. Yeah. What got you there what got you here won't get you there in terms of being great at sales will not make you a great sales leader. And so sales leadership training is a part of my practice. And so I decided to write a book specifically for sales leaders to help them be the kind of leaders that their teams would fight to work with again. Not just hitting their quota. Hitting your quota and selling is a byproduct of your team being excellent, working hard for you, putting in that discretionary effort, being coached. And so this book, it's called The Sales Leader They Need, is all about how to drive those behaviors.
Where do people get a hold of you, David? Where can they get some of your stuff, some of your cerebral stuff?
The best place is just go to my website, cerebralselling.com. So all one thing, cerebralselling.com. You'll find links to my books. You'll find, you know, articles, videos. Everything is on the site. Or you can hit me up on LinkedIn as well if you're on LinkedIn. Just say you heard us here with Sinjin on the Rural Sales Show. But yeah, website is there for you. I give away too much stuff for free. You don't have to register.
Do you know why? I say that too, and sometimes I get that criticism, or maybe it's an inner critic. But the fact is, it's because you've got so much stuff. And because you've got so much stuff, you're always creating more stuff. Like, you know, that scarcity versus abundance. People say, oh, I give away too much stuff. It's like, well, if you're worried about giving away too much stuff, it's because you haven't got enough stuff. You got plenty of stuff. And I can't wait to see your... God.
No, whenever anyone asks me, so it's funny, like my content is very utilitarian. So I find that whenever anyone asks me a question, and I find I keep explaining the same things over and over again, I create a piece of content that, you know, addresses that. So now I have this big repository. And then I thought, when I wrote Sell the Way You Buy, I had already written dozens of articles. I'm just going to smush them all together into a book, which is not the case. It's a totally different kind of project. But I don't choose what I write. I write based on the questions people have.
And you will never have writer's block because you're continually having these conversations and you're curious, intelligent, and you're discovering all those sort of things. And it's the insight that then informs the content. And I think that's a gift. So thank you for coming on our small but hopefully specialised show. Very, very grateful for you giving us your time. Most importantly, helping sellers be better. Because I think that's why you and I do what we do, because I think we see too much, there's unnecessary suffering going on in sales, and I think that's why you and I do what we do. Am I right or am I right?
Yeah, 100%. Oh yeah. This is a tough gig. It's like the easiest gig to get into. It's tough to be really good. That's why I believe what Dan Pink says in To Sell is Human. He says, in a world, I'm going to totally butcher this, but he says, in a world where people have access to all the information they need, where, that we exist in this sea of never-ending solutions, being good at sales, or he calls it moving people, requires as much sophistication as, reading an MRI or architecting a house. Sales is a thinking person's profession now. So I'll leave it at that.
How good is that? That's really a thinking person's profession. Is sales. Very, very good. Thank you for being a gift. Thank you for being so generous and putting out books like this. Can't wait to read your next book. And again, incredibly grateful for your time, your wisdom, and your generosity here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.